It's the worst of the CBC for March 1st, 2021, the show where I watch the CBC so you don't have to. Okay, I'm gonna hand it to them. The story they let off was the right story that should have been the top story. It was about Trudeau's quarantine hotels, the forced isolation centers for travelers, and they brought up some good points. That story was a solid 7 out of 10. Solid 7 out of 10. Now, it was very easy to get a 9 out of 10, so it was an easy 9 out of 10. They only got a 7 out of 10, which is, great for CBC numbers, right? You would expect the CBC would take an easy 9 out of 10 and turn into a 3 out of 10 at best. But no, they covered the fact that they're running short on supplies and food. There's complete mismanagement. They make no sense. The thought of putting people in hotels to quarantine is we can't trust people to quarantine by themselves, so we must make sure that the government, which knows everything, puts them in the hotel rooms and leaves them there so they can't infect anyone else. But they're covering the fact that, of course, the government has messed this up immediately, and people are being put in massive waiting rooms with dozens of other people. So they actually brought on a woman and said, listen, by doing this, I was exposed to, dozens of other people if I was potentially infected, opposed to if I had just rented a car and driven to my place to quarantine and potentially only interacted with one other person. This makes no sense from a public safety point of view. And it was pretty clear by anyone who watched that CBC clip that these hotel forced isolation sites are a bad idea that is being run ineffectively. Now, where they do not go far enough is they don't talk about the fact there's no locks on people's doors. They didn't talk about the sexual assaults that are happening because of them. They are not then advocating for what is the point of them anyway if they're not actually saving people interaction, if they're increasing the potential infected interactions. What's the point of this? The whole justification of this massive civil liberties curtailment is to reduce the amount of social interactions of potentially infected people coming from a foreign place, to reduce, variants or whatever. That's the reasoning given. However, what you are doing is you've created a system where you've increased, not decreased. Shocking, the government could increase something that they're trying to decrease. They've increased the amount of interactions of potentially infected people with variants with other people. So not only does this do the opposite of what it's said to do, but there's a massive civil liberties infringement in order to do it. Now that sort of was alluded to, but not touched on. But at least it was alluded to. So great job. That was a 7 out of 10. And, it was a lead story, so it was actually worth it. So I'm going to give that story an 8 out of 10 just because they let it and it was worth it. This is me marking, a kindergartner, keep in mind. This is you look at the CBC? It's no. It's a 4-year-old has just shown me a picture they made, and there's 2 stick figures. It's me and daddy, and I'm this is the greatest thing ever, and I'm putting it on the fridge. This is what I'm doing for the CBC. I'm taking their little story today, and I'm putting it on the fridge and saying what a special boy they are, because they're a real special CBC today. So biggest admission. So there's parts of that. The story that I have to correct that they did do is they did this, Canada and the U.S. are now aligned on foreign policy. Yay! We both agree that we should kill the Canadian economy. Woohoo! And they started to play things now with Biden in charge, maybe the U.S. can start helping us with the Chinese and getting the 2 Michaels back. It's if there's any president who could do it, it was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was great at putting pressure on the Chinese. The problem was Justin Trudeau was controlled by the sort of woke left, in the type of left that could never admit that Donald Trump, did anything correct. So he didn't get America's help because he was being obstinate and anti-Trump. So that's why Trump didn't help him. Had he, been part of Trump's foreign policy to put pressure on China in any amount, he would have got the 2 Michaels back or support. But the reason the Americans didn't support us in trying to bring the 2 Michaels back is because we were lobbying to make the world more lenient on China, not harder on China. So we're actually undermining American foreign policy, but also Canadian foreign policy. Nothing greater than undermining your own foreign policy in the Trudeau administration. And the Chinese knew this, and the Americans knew this, and the media knows this. So, it's all a bunch of gaslighting here about how... And at least they brought up, Andy Blinken, the American Secretary of State, at least brought up, they brought up the fact that, Trudeau's own cabinet was forced he forced them not to vote on the genocide in the Zhejiang province. Come on. So they were still, sort of running that sort of propaganda, this is how it works, but, misframing foreign politics just to sort of, push whatever the Liberal Party wants, but it's just really, really, it's really bad for the country. So that was the CBC today. Short episode. It's probably not going to be the most views because it's Daniel saying, the CBC wasn't that bad. They just made minor mistakes. But But I'm being intellectually honest. When they're not terrible, I'll get on here and say, hey, they weren't that terrible today. So they'll probably be terrible tomorrow. But today I did not want to take a spoon and dig my eyeballs out while watching it, which gives it a 2 out of 10 on the Rosemary Barden scale of bias. I'll see you tomorrow. Well, actually, I'll see you later today if you're going to watch the China video.